Well, hi everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Godcast. Father Alex here. Thank you for joining me. My guest this week on the Godcast is Alex Phillips. Alex is a presenter for Talk Radio and she's worked in media for a number of years. So I do very much hope you enjoy this interview. If you do, then do please check out my book, which is called Our Daily Bread from Argos to the Altar, a Priest Story, which is available in Woodstones and in all good bookshops and online. And do check out all the other interviews that are out there. There are literally hundreds with politicians, celebrities, singers, musicians, authors, clerics, you name it, there's something for everybody. But for now, I do hope you enjoy this interview with Alex Phillips. Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me on the Godcast this week is Alex Phillips, who is a well-known presenter for Talk Radio. And Alex, it's great to get you on. How are you?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm not too bad actually. Today I've woken up for the first time in quite a while, really, and just feel pressure off my shoulders, and the knot of anxiety in my stomach has eased somewhat. It's been a roller coaster having to present every day during really tumultuous times when debate's been so divided, and also when we started to feel like, how can we use the right words? And not just in terms of this feeling of there being a creeping censorship that we haven't had before, but responsibility, to make sure when tensions are high, that you're not saying anything that's going to provoke people, that you listen to them, that you become an outlet, that you become catharsis for them, because I think there's been a complete failure to do that in certain quarters. And so they feel they've got a home and they feel they are free to talk openly, because if they're not, then you have building resentment, but at the same time you're not doing anything to then justify them acting on concerns they may have in a way that ends up being counterproductive.
Well, that's a really interesting start, Alex, because I'm immediately going off piste here. I've got my questions ready, but I don't know if you know the broadcaster Cole Morton. I was speaking to him last week about journalism and about broadcasting. I'm a huge fan of radio as a platform. And I mentioned the fact that I listened to a Radio 4 interview some years ago who suggested the press become quite narcissistic about pretty much anything, and they were looking to fill space. And he gave me a really good challenge back, actually. He said he felt that the responsibility was one with the listener, but two also with the broadcaster to make sure the content is good and of high quality. What's your take on that?
Oh, wow. I mean, we've got a big problem, I think, by and large, in this country of broadcasting, because I think that, it's so complex. Okay. And just for disclosure, I like to pray. And my sort of main prayer, is it like if you say a prayer out loud that it's like breaking a wish or something? I hope not. But my main prayer, when I've sort of had a chance to find solace in a church or just quietly by myself, has been, Lord, you've given me this position and a privilege, and with that comes great responsibility. Lend me your voice, inspire me, and be present within me so I use it wisely. And I think that broadcasters think they're doing this sometimes, but sometimes they think they're doing it for the wrong reasons, or they don't know they're doing it for the wrong reasons. And so an example I can give is, I know there's a BBC Panorama programme coming out soon about the riots that have taken place in the United Kingdom. I know this because they invited me on to talk about it. And throughout this period, I've tried to be a rational voice, but a voice that really does talk about another side to this debate, which I see as part of the reasons we're having such problems in this country, because it's the voices of people who feel they're not being heard. And I think they're justified in feeling that way. So I sit down to have what I think is a good conversation. And we have a long form interview, and I'm very happy with, it was tough, it was challenging at times, and I was quite happy with, by and large, how I answered things. Then all of a sudden there was a call from the producer, and they wanted more. They wanted to get a raise out of me, basically. And so they started framing questions in a way that I really did not like. So they say, surely this is all Nigel Farage's fault, this sort of reductive prompting me, because that's a very dear friend of mine. And I'm there going, well, no, it's not. But he did say this, didn't he? But he did, that sort of gotcha, that challenging thing. And I'm thinking, well, this is ridiculous. Everyone sort of personified Nigel Farage as causing these riots. The man wasn't even in the country. He had just put a form of words on Twitter that, from my point of view, a lot of people had done, because an atrocity had happened, and the human response is to want answers. And he was basically put up for persecution for all of this, which is deeply dangerous to him personally. So I didn't like that at all. And then they kept saying to me, but these were racist riots, weren't they? These were racist riots. And I'm like, no, they weren't. There were elements of, horrific racism in them. I mean, we definitely saw some people have, but I said I don't think we should categorize these as racist riots. There was a whole smorgasbord of things going on, but it was like they wanted to trip me up, to make me be put in a position of, and I could see what they were doing. I was like, they're going to edit this to say that I've been part of the problem and now I won't admit that these have been race riots. And I'm trying to be, and they think they're doing something right by doing this. They think they're sort of getting someone out of the system who is a poison, or that they're on the side of righteousness. And I'm like, no, what you're doing is building a very reductive narrative and trying to evidence it. And that's the problem we've had with broadcasting, frankly, for decades now, which is why one half of society are fed up. And I don't think it's helped anybody, really. I don't think it helps minority communities. I don't think it helps our sort of established working class white communities. It doesn't help anybody. And I think this is the problem. Broadcasting has become, by and large, campaigning media. It's forgotten how to investigate things that need to be investigated. It investigates the trendy topics. It's forgotten how to ask questions that need to be asked and take views from all sides. It's become very much a campaigning tool of what is so-called progression, and a lot of things that I think that we've held dear in this country for a long time have taken a kicking as a result, actually including Christianity. No holds barred approach to the religion of this country, but other religions are very much protected. Some have sort of, I would suggest, over promoted, and I think that there's a responsibility actually to look at the culture and heritage of our nation and be proud of it, and to not feel ashamed about saying it is worth defending and it's worth asking questions when it might be being relegated. But even talking about this to you openly, I'm kind of in my head, I'm thinking, am I allowed to say this? That's where I think we've gone wrong, okay? And that's why we've got such a mess. That's why there's so much poison right now in our debate. And that, I think, has in a huge part been the responsibility or abrogation of duty by elements of our media.
Wow, Alex, what a start. I mean, I could just throw me questions over my shoulder now, because you've evoked a number of things. I'm people who are new to the Godcast, I'm based in Burnley in Lancashire, very hard edged working class urban town, and I work in a very challenging context. And I think one of the things that people refuse to talk about is there is an element of extreme right wing in some of these provincial towns, and they are, Tommy Robinson came here not at the last election but the one before, and people turned out they were interested in what he had to say. I suppose the question I've got for you, Alex, is where does thuggerish right wing begin, and where does intellectual right-wing argument start and finish, if that makes sense? So I agree with you. When they see these riots, the first port of call to attack is people like Nigel Farage. I think that's a cheap shot. That's not my political argument. I just feel that as a human being. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think what no one has been doing for a long time, as we are on the Goldcast, let's sort of frame things in the manner of, I think, sort of Christianity might encourage people to frame things, is this idea of walk with me. Let's talk about this, walk with me. So no one has gone to Tommy Robinson. No one's gone to the people who find refuge in Tommy Robinson, frankly, and said, walk with me. What's on your mind? Because I think if you got these people to try and explain, and also, they don't have the language of the political elites and the journalists. They can't frame their thoughts and their feelings in a way that's ever going to sound acceptable to somebody who is sort of, PR'd into knowing every single taboo. Quite the opposite, actually. They're going to say things that a lot of people might find quite upsetting in the modern age, but there are things that they need to say. And I'd imagine that if you really sort of, walked with them one day and spoke with them, they might say something a bit like this. My great-grandfather fought in the First World War. He's in a battlefield in France. My grandparents were part of the war effort, serving on the front line, working in munitions factories. helping out, driving ambulances. I remember them making me roast dinners. I remember Sundays in the local pub. Now all I see is people around me who've got no idea about my grandparents. They've gone. Their imprints, their fingerprints, their footprints in this land that was ours have been covered up by the tides of time. And I feel like I don't have anywhere, that I don't belong here anywhere myself anymore, because I don't have a job, because the pub I used to go to doesn't exist anymore. And what I see are other people who are coming here and turning our lands that my grandparents helped to build into their land. They're taking it from us. They've invaded it. You know, I think that those are hard things to hear, right? People aren't allowed to think that. Yet I'm pretty sure that that is what a lot of these people are thinking. And in the same way that we talk about colonialism of the past and talk about the white man going into Africa or India and ruling it and forcing things upon native populations, and we say that was bad. I'm not saying that, you know, immigration has been an invading force. It hasn't. But there's going to be a same sense of the native population feeling displaced. And I think that that is something that, instead of saying you can't say it, you're evil to say it, you're racist to say it, you need to understand that this is probably part of human biology that is very difficult to manage unless you talk and walk with those people. And that is something that I think the Bible has always understood. It's understood the frailties of man, the fallibilities of our psychology, the imperfection. And it is actually taken the time to understand those things and try and help people understand those things about themselves. And in doing so, bring people together. Now, what I think has been missing is any attempt to understand Tommy Robinson, because he is a symptom. He's not a cause. And instead of actually going, well, who is this man? What does he want from this? What are the people who listen to him want from this? And have that discussion. It's just been, he's vile, he's far right, he's a thug, he's a working class man, okay? He believes he is fighting for something. Now, whether we believe in that, whether we share in his fight, or I think we have to try and understand it. And understand that this man is not prime minister with a lectern. He hasn't been schooled at Eton and Oxford. He doesn't have the language of the elites, but he really thinks he's fighting for something. And the people that follow him think that his fight is a good fight. Unless you can understand where they are coming from as well, and then try and bring the two sides together in a sort of form of conflict resolution, you're just going to stay with conflict. And that's where we're going wrong. So this is where I think, when you talk about right-wing discussion and dialogue and then thuggery, a lot of it is about the failure to have that conversation, and also understanding actually that if you're going to talk about the working classes, they're going to use their language, right? And it's not going to be language that is acceptable in this day and age, because we've had so much censorship and taboo about the terms we use, and even the ideas that are allowed to be aired, but they need to be, because sunlight's the greatest disinfectant. And unless we can get these people to talk about them without sneering at them, without ostracizing them and pushing them further away and making them angrier, we're just going to keep seeing this sort of rinse and repeat of, you know, frustration boiling over into protest, which then gets hijacked and turned into riots.
Yeah, and there's very little I can personally disagree with there, Alex. But what I mean, you know, somebody who is a working class priest, I have those struggles internally within the Church of England every single day about the language that the Church of England speaks compared to the language that the people in my context use. They're two completely different things. But I would like to ask you then, bearing in mind that the Conservative have been in power for a long time, who do you think is responsible for the recent troubles out? Where does the root cause analysis lie in that situation?
There's no one person. It's all of us. It's everything. It's a society that has sort of developed in a global context far quicker than it's been able to provide solutions to problems and answers to questions that we've never had to ask before. But also, you know, this has happened throughout history. This is not new, right? Whenever you've had demographically shifting countries, okay? And this is in the Bible as well, isn't it? All of the various tribes and how they fought each other. And you know, this is not brand new information. Like I said, this is hardwired into humanity. We're social creatures. We're animals that form groups and connections within a limited framework. So that's always happened. And similarly, as soon as there becomes competition for resources, it heightens the sense of struggle between different factions and groups. I mean, it happens always. This is not new. This is just how humans work. So who is responsible? I mean, nobody. It is life. That sounds ridiculous, but all of us are now responsible for trying to manage it and try and find the solutions. And you know, I just hope that the people who have those portfolios and have the abilities to make decisions that will have an impact have that sort of commonsensical approach, rather than doing what I think is being done, which breaks my heart, which is a preferential treatment of one group to another, which ends up increasingly pitting one group against another, vilifying one group. I mean, it can't work that way. If you look throughout time, you know, cultures, it takes a long time, right, for cultures to bind together and form their new culture, a new sort of a hegemony forged from their independent origins. You look at our Christian calendar, so much of it is sort of dictated by the Romans. And it was the Romans who put Jesus on the cross. You know, it's so, and then you've got paganism in all of it as well, with the certain dates and festivals. It is itself a sort of forging of belief systems and invading armies and clashing tribes that have sort of grown together to create something that existed and lasted comfortably for quite a long time. And you know, then all of a sudden you get these periodical strains and tensions, and in time time is a great healer. But when you're in the middle of it, you just need people to understand historical context. And this is where, you know, I actually I regret that Christianity doesn't play as big a role in our society anymore, because it is, to me, the greatest self-help book or societal help book that's ever been written.
Well, I think that's a really interesting point. And I have to say, Alex, it's really refreshing. A lot of my guests are happy to talk about faith and Jesus and religion, and some of them less so. But you know, just the question that I've asked you, I sometimes wonder if the secularization of the country is one of the reasons why we are where we are. I'd be interested to unpack that a little bit with you, because I wonder how much, you know, I wonder if you would be encouraged to speak with such confidence about faith on talk radio or on the BBC, you know, and whether, as the secularized world controls the media, and whether Christianity has, well, I think it has been completely sidelined and doesn't have a voice in the argument, or if it does, again, it's on the extremes. It's the Calvin Robinsons of this world that are given a platform, who's also been on the Godcast. But again, what's your thoughts?
Okay, so without looking at it from a personal point of view, which is I realised in later life, adult life, by the way, I wasn't brought up a Christian. I'm not actually being baptized or christened at all, and it's actually been much later in my life that I've suddenly had this. There are various things that happened that brought me to God, and now I just have a deep comfort and faith that he's there, and he helps me a lot. But putting that aside, and my own feeling about how helpful it is, I think if you just look at it objectively, any religion in any community, any belief system, any sort of higher moral order, right, at the top of the tree, is the thing that then keeps other people in line and bound together. Because you don't have, I'm right, he's right, they're right, this is better, that's better, this is what we should do. You have, this is what God says, okay? The divine authority trumps everything. So you take God out of the equation and you better have a good replacement. And we haven't. What we've got is we've replaced it with a lot of neo-religions, such as climate change, trans rights, whatever it may be, things that actually have good intent, okay? I'm not saying, when I say neo-religions, I don't mean that these are sort of, you know, devilish constructions to usurp Christianity, but they've taken on a religiosity because people become so impassioned by these things, and perhaps rightly so, but they've taken on this sort of fervorish mania that really doesn't help them in their progress. And especially when it comes to the huge sort of battle space, which is sort of societal norms and mores. And I look especially at, you know, the union of man and woman, wedlock, sex before marriage, gay relationships, gay marriage, now increasingly gender fluidity and all of these things. And you can see the absence of Christianity at play. That is, to me, exactly the vacuum when Christianity's gone. That is that at work. Do I feel ashamed of talking about, Christianity gets a kicking all the time. Funny enough, talking about that Panorama interview, at the end of the interview and the tapes have stopped rolling, I actually did say, during this time it's been difficult. And as someone who believes in God, I've really tried to sort of ask him to help me out here and get my words right. And the laugh and the sneer and the derision that I had a result of saying that was palpable. But do we care as Christians? No, we don't. We don't get het up. We don't have sort of blasphemy rules and you've insulted my religion, which is why Christianity has been able to be kicked for so long. But Christianity is also one of the most organic religions in a sense of it is growing again. I think if you look down the generations now to younger children, they're coming to try and find answers. They're realizing that there's an absence. And where there is an absence of God, all of a sudden people find a need for him again. And I don't feel ashamed talking about it. I do realize that we live in an incredibly secular country now where Christianity has been mocked. And actually, frankly, it was a very unpopular viewpoint then, and it will remain a very unpopular viewpoint now. But I thought the intervention of state on church with the Gay Marriage Act was wrong. Not to say that I am a homophobe. I don't think gay people should be able to get married or be united in a civil partnership that has equity with a heterosexual partnership. What I found wrong about it was this idea that David Cameron could tell the church what to do and tell them that the Bible might have been mistaken. I'm like, okay, that's an overstep. And that's where I think that we've made mistakes socially. We could have had that discussion about how we politically create equity within partnerships under the eyes of the law, and then allow people privately to go about getting their blessings and let religious institutions have the freedom to determine what they wanted to do in the same way we've provided that for Sikhism, Hinduism, Islam. We didn't say, oh, you've got to be able to have gay people marry in a mosque. We don't even say, oh, well, women and men should be in the same room in a mosque, because religious freedom is very important in this country. So Christianity should be accorded the same. And I think it's good that we don't get too uptight and upset when people mock Christianity. I think a lot of the teachings of the Bible forewarn that that's exactly what's going to happen. But I do think it's important that we don't allow its erasure to happen, that we don't suddenly say from now on no school assemblies or no, when we start de-Christianizing certain things which are inbuilt to our tradition, so saying Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, get importing that from America. No, it's blimmin' Christmas. You wouldn't say to Islam, don't say Ramadan, say happy festive period instead. That's just insulting. So that nonsense, that sort of, that attacking secularization, that needs to stop, okay? Because what you're doing then is really pulling out the sort of the rug from underneath our culture's feet, and that ends up with a mess that I think in part we're seeing play out right now.
It's so fascinating listening to you, Alex. I should perhaps lay my cards on the table that I'm a trustee of Inclusive Church, and I'm a Christian who's affirming of same-sex relationships. But just what you've said, I think one of the joys of being what I would call an inclusive priest is that I think everybody's got a right to a particular position and a view, and that should never be breached. The freedom of speech is so important, I think. But I wonder where you think church sits now in the wider society. Has it got an important role to play in politics? I personally think it has. I think we saw some awful upset last week, and I think we, as a church, we played an important role in calming the storm, for want of looking for a biblical phrase. We calmed the storm and things moved on. But in the wider world, Alex, what if anything has the church got to offer?
Church and politics is a very interesting mix, and in times past where we've seen this, thanks Henry VIII, in our history.
His fault.
Yeah, it's had unfortunate consequences. One of my favourite places on the planet is Tintern Abbey in Monmouthshire, which of course was one of the abbeys that was ransacked during the schism and the following sort of aftermath. And And it stands there like this amazing sort of bones of something that once was, and it's become a cathedral to nature. You know, you walk on a grass altar and look up to a painted chapel of clouds, which is the actual sky. And it moves me. When I go there, I feel such an incredible sense of a story, you know, of things, of problems, battles that we've had, of clashing religions, societal divides, overbearing monarchs. And, you know, it's a brilliant emblem to our history. It encapsulates so much. But it also is an emblem to when politics and religion clash. And that's really where I was talking about with the Gay Marriage Act. I mean, I would want it to be the case that a vicar can have his church and say, these are my beliefs, this is my interpretation of the Bible, and I want to wed whoever wants to be wed and give that the blessing of the Lord. So I'm not saying that that shouldn't be allowed in a church. What I'm saying is it wasn't up to David Cameron, right? Get out. It wasn't it shouldn't. But again, you can sort of trail that back to good old Henry VIII and the mess he's left of our unwritten constitution. But the difficulty I've had recently is Justin Welby has tried quite hard to involve himself in politics. And I think it's not having it's not having the desired effect at all, quite the opposite. I think that there are people who say, well, okay, you're trying to keep up to date with the narratives and find words to say in the current context, but the Bible is timeless and we don't hear enough of that in what you're saying. In response to the riots, he said something I found very peculiar, okay? He said that the riots were unchristian. Now, I thought that was answering a question that nobody had asked. I don't think anyone thought those riots were Christian. I don't think anyone had associated those acts of violence with Christianity. So I thought that was a very, I don't know, to me, maybe, you know, he was just trying to say that as Christians, but he then said to Christians, don't participate in these things. And I kind of think, I don't think I know any Christian who would. You're not, I mean, they are unchristian because no Christian on earth, I don't think, would go and do that. And I don't think those were Christian people doing it. And I thought that was sort of a bit demeaning and the wrong approach. When I think that what churches should do, and it's become incredibly difficult, right? Wherever I go, if I'm visiting any old village or town, I walk past a church, I have to go inside. I just want to be inside it and see what it's like and, you know, check out the architecture and the history, but also have a little moment of solitude and solace with God and see if I can find a Bible and just, I do a sort of a tombola approach. I sort of flick through and open a page and close my eyes and point at a paragraph and go, that's the one I'm going to read. And so many churches' doors are locked today. I mean, it's very hard to find an open church in a city, especially, I'm sure for security reasons, right? And for crime, they don't want people robbing things in the churches, but that churches should be where people go that fling open the doors and I think an active approach would be good. You know, if you have a church who, after a problem, prints out flyers and puts it through the letterboxes of, you know, the streets around that church and says, if you want to come and ask, you know, and just have a moment of peace, you can have a religious moment or it can be a secular moment. If you want to come on in, we got some tea and some biscuits, you know. That is to me a role that churches could and should play a lot more. I think as well, it's worth pointing out that there is a lot going on in the Church of England that people don't see unless they've been swept up in it. So my church is part of the HTB network, Holy Trinity Brompton. And I'm lucky to live in that part of London. So, I mean, I work Sundays now, so I don't get to go anymore, particularly. But I love that. I love the modernity of a sort of rock group on stage, the new songs, the new way of preaching, and it's reaching a huge congregation. You know, HTB, it queues around the block to get in, and the live stream gets loads and loads of views. And when you actually go into that congregation, you see people from every country on earth imaginable and of every age, and they are swept up in a sort of joint moment of such beauty. I cannot be in a HTB service without tears pouring from my eyes, because it's that coming together, that congregative moment, I don't know if that's a word, of everyone sharing in hope and positivity, and not even necessarily belief at that point, because I think a lot of people go, it's like a gateway church if you're exploring Christianity with the Alpha course and so on and so forth. But Nikki Gumbel has created the app the Bible in 1 year, where you can just listen every day, and he sort of it's like a school assembly almost. He gives a sort of, there's a message, and he takes you around bits of the Bible and lays out an important argument, and it's so therapeutic. And I just think, blimey, if everybody, you know, whether they believed in Christ or not, just it's like 10 minutes, just listen to that every day. Instead of going on blimmin' Twitter or Instagram. I mean, I like Twitter, by the way, but it has its major faults. If they just listened to that every day, or started their day with a kind of school assembly, I think everyone would be so much more calm. It's my other half, who isn't a believer, always says that I need to get my vitamin G, that I become a happy woman when I've got my vitamin G. And he's right. It's like a bit of sunshine. You know, if you live in the dark or shut up in your house too long, you get sad. And I think if you're locked away from spirituality, whatever form that might take, for too long, then you get sad. So that is the role I think the church should play. It should find innovative, modern ways to fit today's narrative and fit today's wants and needs. But that isn't about chasing the latest politics. That's about staying the Church of England, staying a sort of timeless entity, but finding fresh ways to communicate itself.
Yeah, some interesting stuff in there. I mean, for people who aren't familiar with HTB, they are perhaps kind of seen as the Tesco of the church world. They do big church plants, and it's great to hear that you've had such a positive experience of that. And somebody who is perhaps a little bit more traditional and a bit higher up the candle, you know, I see some churches of different traditions and also doing some really extraordinary things. And you know what you said about opening the doors up, we've really tried to open up our doors, and the diversity in our church is a really beautiful thing. You know, we've got nationalities from across the globe who bring so much to the worship, so much to the community as well. Alex, this has absolutely flown by. I mean, I've really not literally touched my questions, but I'd just perhaps finish with political matters. How do you see the next kind of quinquennium playing out in the political world? You know, I don't know if I say I worry, but because I kind of think of myself as a bit of a right-wing socialist, if there is such a thing. Do you think it's possible that Mr. Farage could be the next Prime Minister?
Yeah, of course it is. Anything's possible, okay? And actually, even under our first past the post system, that could, when you look at reforms results from the last election, with loads of second places, they know exactly where to target now. And an incumbent government often takes a hitting after a first term. So a lot of this will depend upon the success of Sir Keir Starmer. And I wish him well. I want him to be very successful because any successful Prime Minister is making a success of our country. So to me, it doesn't matter who's in number 10. I wish them well. And I really, really hope that if they're brilliant and they've done all the right things, they get to stay. But it usually is a challenge because incumbent governments have a track record upon which they can be judged. So it is possible, indeed, that Nigel could end up in number 10. In a wider context, the big issues that we face are those of globalization and global government, if you will. Now, I know that sounds a bit tinfoil hat. When we say global governance, that sounds a bit tinfoil hat because people, the WEF and Davos and all that. No, what I'm talking about is increasingly we are delegating up to supranational entities because the problems that we face have a global texture to them. And that is something that I think a lot of people are feeling uncomfortable about in terms of they feel like they're then locked out of the democratic process. And that, you know, if you imagine democracies like butter, if you've got a small piece of bread, you've got a nice thick layer of butter and it tastes delicious. The bigger the spread of democracy, so when it's at an EU level or then a UN level, the thinner it is. And that's when people then start feeling detached and out of the system, and that more people aren't sort of, they are left behind, or, you know, the one size fits all approach can have very disastrous consequences. And so that is something in an increasingly global world, those are questions we've got to ask. I think as well, and this is, you know, something that I think, you know, people like you and I need to think about, more you with your job, that we have always had a struggle between Islam and Christianity throughout history. Spanish Inquisition, Crusades, Barbary pirates, you name it. This is a struggle as old as time, as old as Islam and Christianity have had to coexist. Some countries have managed to do this really well. I used to live in Ghana, and for all the problems Ghana may or may not have, there is no struggle between Muslims and Christians, as far as I can tell, at all. It's a beautiful example. So how do we look at that and learn lessons from that? Because right now, with everything going on as well in the Middle East, the age-old battle between Islam and Judaism is peaking right now, and this is having a huge ripple effect across the world, not just across the Western world, but across communities where you have got Islam coexisting with other religions. And that is, we can't be shy about talking about that. We cannot shrink away from that, because that is one of the greatest issues facing us today. And this is where I think Christianity struggles, for the sheer fact that Islam was invented later. So there, you can't go to the Bible as easily for answers on this one, because it wasn't written late enough to have the answers to this problem in a sort of up-to-date way. So that is something I think we need to reflect on and try and understand. And Christianity needs to be prepared to protect itself, but not allow that ever to spill over into a form of aggression or attack. And at the moment, Christianity is so afraid of it spilling over into a form of aggression or attack at any point that it's failing to even protect itself. So those, I think, are huge political issues that will need to be addressed.
Well, I was going to end it there, but you keep provoking me to. I think it's fascinating again what you've been saying. I think there's in Berlin we've got a very large Muslim community, and when I drive past, not every town has an HDB church plant. That maybe is an issue. A lot of towns across the country have got the traditional parish church networks where there are a handful of people. And I do sometimes think when they see people in the mosque in all their glory, where there's hundreds, sometimes thousands of people, I wonder if there's sometimes a subliminal jealousy going on there. This sense of because one of the things I personally admire about the Muslim community is the fact that it's a very strong community. It's very together, and I think sometimes wonder if we've just lost that sense of belonging to something. And of course, to me, that would be that sense of belonging to a faith, a church, a network, and I probably just wanted to add that in, Alex. Can I finish by asking, do you think we'll ever see Alex Phillips on the ballot paper?
Of course.
I thought so.
Not really, right? I kind of think that my journey in life is, I think that he sort of has played an incredible role in getting me where I am, and has a plan for me. And I hope that, anyone who's listening to this who's not a Christian and doesn't get it might think this sounds weird or balmy. But I think of myself as a vessel of the Lord, and that he has a plan for me, and that he operates through me, or at least I want him to. I want to sort of, allow that to happen. And the older I've got, and actually when I sort of found myself thinking, God, I'm actually a Christian. I hadn't really thought about this before, but I am. It was like a weird revelation. I've always been one and just hadn't put a label on it. I'd actually sort of done what a lot of people do, which is say like, yeah, I have Christian values, but I don't believe, And I sort of thought, well, funnily enough, the reason why you hold on to those values and haven't just poo-pooed them and thought they're mad is because you believe in them. And so, this idea that it's a man with a white beard up on the cloud, it's somehow it's more, to me, intrinsic than that. I studied metaphysics at university and found Hinduism fascinating, and it sort of opened my mind to sort of being able to see more complexities in terms of the realities of the forms of God. And so, God, I'm going off on a mad tangent now, but no, but I in that regard, I think that he's got a plan for me. Some people might call it fate. Let's call it God. And I think that the closer I've got to him, the more I've realized I want to be somebody who serves and tries to do things that, you know, really help the world with the skills that I have, and be that broadcasting or politics is always going to be in that domain. But I think, yeah, I'll be on a ballot paper.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I'm going to plug my book, Alex. So my
Hey.
book, Our Daily Bread from Argos to the Altar, which is in Waterstones and all good bookshops. Somebody contacted me actually this morning and said, "When did you feel good enough, you know, to recognise God's call?" I'm not sure if I've ever felt good enough, but I think advice I would offer to you as a
Yeah. Oh, please, come on, that's what your job is, right?
would be, you know, if we feel that God is using us as a vessel, then we must keep walking through the doors. You know, as the doors, I think quite often Christians can be quite timid and refuse to take that leap of faith, for want of a better expression. But I think if God's opening the doors, my advice to you and to anybody is to keep walking through them and to speak of the gospel, because it's desperately needed. It really is right now. So there we are. There we are. That was a bit of wisdom from Father Alex. Anyway, but Alex, I've loved having you on. I think you're a wonderful, I don't mean to patronise, you're such an effervescent character. When can we see you on Talk Radio? Listen to you again on the radio when you're next on?
Oh, do you know, at the moment I'm covering for my old telly husband Kev, who's on holiday. So I'm doing the 7 till 10 shift. Then Friday I've got my own show, which is 10 till 1. I'm having the weekend off next week, 7 till 10, Monday to Thursday, Friday 10 till 1. Then it's a movable feast. So I just say, you know, if you want to know when I'm on talk, just got to follow me on Twitter, really.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm hard to pin down. I'm like a bar of soap in the shower.
Yeah. Well, guys, there's lots of talk presenters on the Godcast, so go check them out. Alex, thank you. Thank you for coming on the Godcast, and we wish you well.
Thank you, Alex.